In this video, we demonstrate the importance of managing boiler water and main engine cooling water quality. We also explain the structure and functions of distilling plants. As part of their normal duties, operators of marine boilers must carefully analyze feed water, condensate and boiler water, determine a course of action based on the results of this analysis, and then take the steps dictated by the course of action. Water used for marine boilers is treated to prevent scale, corrosion and carryover. Let's take a closer look at these boiler-related problems. Impurities found in feed water cause trouble for boilers. Impurities include dissolved salts, such as salt electrolytes and silica, dissolved gases, such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, and oils and fats that may find their way into the boiler from the plant's drain system. When feed water impurities are subjected to thermal decomposition and chemical reaction, they produce water-insoluble substances. Some of these substances adhere to a boiler's internal heating surfaces in the form of hard scales. Scaling degrades a boiler's heat transfer performance and, through hotter surface temperatures and overheating, can cause pipes to swell and bend. Most corrosion inside a boiler results from electrochemical reactions taking place within boiler water, which acts as the medium. Specifically, corrosion is caused by a difference in electric potential. For example, if the protective iron oxide film inside the boiler is partially destroyed, a local cell forms between the exposed steel surface, the water and the protective film, and iron flows out of the anode. Unchecked, the local cell will continue to bleed iron and the corrosion will eat deeper into the steel surface. Carryover takes place when boiler-generated steam leaves the boiler while still containing water droplets and impurities. A phenomenon known as priming occurs when a low-pressure area is created in the steam cloud, hindering steam separation and resulting in the generation of water droplets. Foaming is the phenomenon by which fine water droplets that have burst violently on the water surface scatter and float within the steam chest. Foaming causes hard scale to accumulate on the superheater and turbine blades, leading to corrosion. There are two types of water treatment: external and internal. External treatment relies on external equipment, while internal treatment is conducted by injecting chemicals into the boiler. Let's begin by looking at some of the typical equipment used for external treatment. This is a cascade tank. It is used to separate and remove oil content, filter out corrosion products, and store feed water. For auxiliary boilers, a cleaner may be injected into the cascade tank and then sent to the boiler unit. The drain return line for heated steam has an inspection tank, which is located in front of the cascade tank. Check this tank regularly for oil content and other floating matter. Based on the results of boiler water testing, you can drain boiler water outboard from the blow-off pipe to reduce enrichment or remove impurities. Boiler water, diesel engine cooling water, and most of the water for domestic use is distilled water produced from seawater by means of a distilling plant. The deaerator is a device that removes dissolved air from feed water. The main boiler has a deaerator. The auxiliary boiler does not. Deaerating feed water is vitally important because air, specifically oxygen and carbon dioxide, dissolved in feed water is a major cause of corrosion found in the feed water system and boiler. Deaerators come in two types: a vacuum type and a pressure control type. Ships use pressure controlled deaerators. This type of unit deaerates feed water by raising the water temperature to its saturation temperature relative to the deaerator's internal pressure after allowing steam to come into direct contact with feed water. Chemicals used for internal water treatment are known generally as cleaners. These include boiler compounds, oxygen scavengers, dispersants, and anti-corrosives for feed water condensate systems. Boiler compounds are used for preventing adhesion of scale to the heat transfer surface, preventing corrosion by properly controlling boiler water pH, and preventing scaling by making sludge in boiler water buoyant. Oxygen scavengers prevent corrosion by removing dissolved oxygen. Hydrazine is typically employed as an oxygen scavenger, but its use is now being restricted because it has been designated a hazardous substance. Sludge dispersants prevent scaling by dispersing sludge into buoyant fine particles. Anti-corrosives inhibit corrosion of feed water condensate systems by controlling pH. Proper boiler water quality management means paying close attention to pH or P alkalinity, phosphate ion concentration, electrical conductivity, residual hydrazine concentration, and silica. Each of these items has a standard value that must be controlled. The Japan Institute of Marine Engineering, the Japanese industrial standards, chemicals manufacturers and shipping companies all have their own standards. So we recommend that you perform water treatment in accordance with the standards adopted by your ship. Take samples of feed and boiler water from operating boilers at least once every 2 days. Use these samples to determine the condition of feed and boiler water. When necessary, take proper measures to address water quality issues. Use on-board analyzers to measure pH, alkalinity, chloride ion and phosphate ion concentrations. Conduct analysis in accordance with instructions and confirm that each measurement value is within its prescribed range. Water analysis kits contain the instruments and reagents you will need to take your measurements. Let's look at the measurement methods you will be using. The pH test paper method is used to measure pH. Soak the test paper in water from your sample. Once the paper has changed color, compare the paper to the chart of reference colors. This method is simple and yields an approximate value for pH. You can also measure pH using a pH meter, although these are not included in the analysis kit. The pH meter allows you to accurately measure pH value. However, you must take special care when using the pH meter. For example, you must correct the pH meter using a standard solution. You must also remember to correct for the electrode's temperature. Here is an example of p-alkalinity measurement. Put an adequate amount of sample water into a beaker and add 3 drops of phenolphthalein indicator. The sample water will turn pink. Next, determine the amount of sulfuric acid consumption by titrating 1/50th prescribed sulfuric acid into the sample water until the pink color disappears. The mercuric nitrate titration method is used to measure chloride ions. Begin by putting an adequate amount of sample water into a beaker and adding 1 milliliter of chloride ion indicator potassium dichromate solution. Then titrate 0.0141 prescribed silver nitrate solution into the sample water until the yellow hue of the water turns light brown, and obtain the amount of the solution titrated. Phosphate ions are measured via the colorimetric method. Add 1 drop of acid consumption primary indicator to the sample. The water turns pink. Then add phosphate primary reagent solution drop by drop until the pink color fades away. Now put the colorless water into a phosphate ion test tube and add phosphate secondary reagent solution. If phosphate ions are present, the sample water turns yellow. Choose a couple of reference ampoules of the closest tints and put them together with the sample into a comparator dark box. This allows you to identify the reference ampoule color corresponding to the sample and find its value, which is the phosphate ion ppm. If your laboratory is equipped with a spectrophotometer, you can use it to accurately conduct colorimetric analysis. The spectrophotometer is a common water quality analyzer that can measure pH and electrical conductivity. To prevent measurement errors, remember to pay strict attention to the instability and service life of light source lamps and to periodically wash tester correction cells. Laboratories and boiler compound makers use dedicated equipment capable of highly accurate water quality testing. Let's look at some of the instruments being used. The electrical conductivity meter measures pH. The ion chromatograph identifies ions contained in a sample. The atomic absorption photometer analyzes types and quantities of substances contained in a sample. water quality at least once a month and control pH level in the standard 8 to 10 range. Also control the concentration of anti-corrosive being used. For effective measurement of anti-corrosive concentration, you can use an inhibitor-specific analysis kit. Put an adequate amount of sample water into a beaker and add solution A to it. Use the burette stopcock to slowly titrate solution B into the sample water. As solution B is titrated, it momentarily turns reddish purple, but the color will disappear if you mix it with the sample water by shaking the beaker. Repeat this process until the sample water turns reddish purple and the color does not disappear after the sample is left standing for a few minutes. Read the burette scale to determine the quantity of solution B consumed. Determine the concentration of anti-corrosive corresponding to the quantity of solution B consumed using a calibration curve. Cast iron is used for marine engine cooling water systems because of its strength. However, iron corrodes when it comes into contact with water. Common method for preventing corrosion of metallic surfaces is to use coating or plating to form a protective film. Within the marine engine cooling water system, however, it is not possible to apply coating or plating to the entire interior surface. As such, anti-corrosive treatment is conducted by adding an anti-corrosive agent to cooling water, so that an anti-corrosive film can be formed on the metal surface. Anti-corrosives are injected into the cooling water expansion tank. This is an anti-corrosive with sludge dispersing action. And this is an anti-corrosive for concentration control. It is used together with a marine use anti-corrosive concentration measurement kit. Most of the water used on ships is distilled from seawater using an onboard distilling plant. Distilling plants operate according to a principle known as the vacuum evaporation method. Under this method, a vacuum is created inside the distilling plant to evaporate seawater. The resultant vapor is cooled and condensed by seawater into distilled water. Seawater is supplied by a seawater pump to a condenser in the upper section of the distilling plant. Some of the seawater is supplied as feed water to the evaporator in the lower section of the distilling plant, where it evaporates as a result of heat exchange with main engine jacket cooling water. During its ascent, the vapor passes through a demister, where residual salinity is removed from an extremely low level. Condensation takes place in the condenser installed in the upper section of the distilling plant. Vapor flows from above and cooled and condensed into distilled water between heat exchange plates using low temperature seawater supplied by the seawater pump. The distilled water is then sent to the freshwater tank by a distillate water pump attached to the plant proper. There are several types of distilling plant, but the vacuum evaporation method is common to all. Shown here is a two-stage flash distillation type unit. This unit evaporates seawater with an evaporator and condenses the resulting steam into a supply of condensate. If operated properly, it allows you to eliminate all solid matter and obtain high-quality water. In this system, seawater heated to at least 60 degrees centigrade jets out from an orifice in the pressure-reduced to approximately 650 millimeters of mercury evaporation chamber, rapidly reducing seawater pressure and initiating self-evaporation. The resulting steam is then cooled and condensed in the evaporator to yield distilled water. Advances in technology have achieved greater efficiency by allowing vacuum evaporators to operate at much lower temperatures and prevent scaling. On modern turbine ships, a stable supply of high-purity distilled water has been made possible by the introduction of a dual-structure steam separation mechanism, steam separation plate and mesh separator in the evaporation chamber. The vacuum evaporation plate type distilling plant produces distilled water by evaporating seawater via low temperature evaporation under an internal vacuum, and then cooling and condensing the resulting vapor. This type of distilling plant is found on many ocean-going ships. Fresh water produced with this type of plant has a low salinity concentration, usually 5 ppm or less, so it can be used for a variety of purposes, including boiler water, operating water for machinery and equipment, and domestic water. Distilled water salinity concentration is monitored using salinity indicators. Should it exceed the prescribed level, a solenoid valve is actuated to prevent the ingress of poor quality water into the freshwater tank. The salinity concentration specification is 1.5 ppm max or 4 ppm max for turbine ships. On diesel-powered ships, it is 10 ppm max. To prevent accidents caused by boiler water and the cooling water system, operators must recognize the importance of water treatment and secure a constant supply of high-quality feed water, condensate and boiler water. They must also be able to acquire the practical knowledge and skills required to properly manage and maintain